2012, Etihad Stadium, Manchester, 92nd minute. David Silva takes a right-sided corner, floating the ball right in on top of the 6-yard box. That cross lands the 6'4" Bosnian striker Edin Dzeko, who powers it home to bring City back level. The Etihad roars back into excitement, willing their team to keep pushing until the very end. 93rd minute. News filters around the stadium that an important game in the north of England has just finished. Manchester United have beaten Sunderland 1-0, and as it stands, the Reds will win another Premier League title. They await the result of the City game. 93rd minute, 20 seconds. Sergio Aguero plays a 1-2 with strike partner Mario Balotelli, who, while lying on the floor, plays his only assist of the season as Sergio Aguero fakes shots and then smashes home in front of a rabid Manchester City crowd. His goal has just yanked the title back from their rivals, giving the club their first league ever. Fans are crying, players are celebrating, managers are going crazy. But let's go back and understand the context of the situation. Hello and welcome to the 10th ever episode of the Unsigned Manager podcast, the 10-week anniversary. Each week, I, Siji Kolawole, break down football's key stories, events and headlines in both the past and the present to make them a bit easier to understand and provide some context on the situation. On this week's 10-week anniversary, I want to take a look at the moment, the day, the season Manchester City became a football powerhouse. So with that, let's get into the episode. We're at the last day of the 11-12 Premier League season, with the top of the table looking real tight. This is a serious title race, probably the best example of a title race we've had in English football. We have two sides of the same coin, two halves of Manchester, battling it out to be the best team in the country. And if you would have said to anyone in England that this was possible 10 years ago, that the great Manchester United, the biggest team in the world, a football superpower, if you would have said to anyone that their biggest rival would be little brother Manchester City, no one would have believed you. But that's kind of how it works in football sometimes. Lille winning Ligue 1, Inter Milan wrestling back Serie A from Juventus, even Leicester winning the Premier League. Football has shown us on multiple occasions that careful planning, good squad building and effective leadership can take you from pretender to contender in a heartbeat. United were probably hoping that City would stay pretender so that they could keep their stranglehold over the Premier League, but that's not exactly how it worked out. So let's go and take a look back. In 1992, the Premier League was formed, becoming the most coveted competition in English football, the hardest league to win, symbolising the elite clubs in the game. And that is the best word used to describe Manchester United, the elite. Between the 92-93 season and the 02-03 season, so the first 11 years of the Premier League, Manchester United won 8 titles. Arsenal were the main challengers, with Newcastle and Blackburn putting in a shift, but honestly it was normally United's title to lose. They had cream of the crop players, an excellent facility and arguably the best manager of all time, Sir Alex Ferguson. Just quickly on Ferguson, he had 2 of the best managerial runs in football history. The 90s run and the mid-2000s run would have been most managers' dream, but then he did it twice. Legendary guy. Anyway, having Ferguson is the biggest competitive advantage any English team has ever had. He's one of the rare examples where a manager is bigger than the players at the club, where he's more important than them. And he was so crazily competitive that any edge he could get to boost his club, he did. Revamping the academy to bring in better players? Check. After an explosive meeting with youth team manager Eric Harrison, Ferguson worked out an agreement to ensure better quality players would be found by the club so he'd have better talent to work with. Constantly playing young players to keep the side fresh and hungry to compete? Check. The class of 92 were a group of academy players Ferguson promoted to the first team, and you may have heard of some of them. Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, Gary Neville, David Beckham. They weren't a bad group of players there. creating a world-class team which became the kings of Europe, quality in every position with an elite attack? Check. Between Beckham, Giggs, Cole, York, Solskjaer and Sheringham, United won a legendary 1999 Champions League final and a treble. Probably the best thing about Ferguson, about most leaders for that matter, is that they aren't afraid to change with the times. When Wenger brought in better health habits for his Arsenal players, Ferguson took the same approach. When Jose implemented a three-man midfield to control the centre of the park to dominate games, Ferguson switched to that formation too. Some people fall in love with what made them successful and they struggle to try new things since what they've done before has worked. Ferguson wasn't like that, and because of it, he had such a stranglehold on the game because he was so adaptable and was willing to change if necessary. But on the other half of Manchester, things were looking a bit more dicey. In the same period where the Reds were building their future legacy as a football dynasty, City was struggling to stay afloat. They spent 11 years bouncing between the Premier League and the Championship like a classic yo-yo team. And they even spent the 98-99 season languishing in League One. They were one of the jokes of the league, and the ridicule from Man United fans must have been unbearable. Whilst they're seeing their rivals set records and cement their legacy, City were choosing between mediocrity and negligence. In the same period, so between 92 and 2003, Manchester City had 10 managers, constantly chopping and changing, including having 4 in 1996 alone. And it wasn't even just on-pitch issues for the Blues. In 94, former City player Francis Lee took over the club from long-standing but unsuccessful chairman Peter Swales. And then Lee preemptively said all his plans for the club, which included making City the happiest club in the land. The players will be the best paid and drink plenty of champagne, celebrate and sing until our voices are hoarse. In the end, Lee would turn out to be right. But it would be a long time until that happened, and he wouldn't be there when that happened. There'd be many more tears before there'd be champagne. Back to the red half of Manchester. We're in the mid-2000s and United's reign of terror is in full swing. Ferguson's team has grown stronger since Jose's introduction to the league, and they've built a solid squad. Just a super quick rundown of the squad Ferguson built, the levels in this team. You've got arguably peak Wayne Rooney, Ballon d'Or winning Cristiano Ronaldo, who might be the best player we've ever seen in the Prem, Rio Ferdinand, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes and Edwin van der Sar. And then what did he do? Oh yeah, he went and added Carlos Tevez and Dimitar Berbatov to that squad, creating a strike force which had all the best attackers in the league. And we're also in the same period where they were in their peak dominance probably. I understand I didn't get to watch the 90s team first hand, but going back and doing research, the difference between that period and the 2000s is the early 90s team didn't have the same level of competitors. Newcastle were close but faded. Blackburn was strong for a season, but then they lost Shearer. So until Wenger comes into the league in around 96, United are pretty much unparalleled. In the 2000s, Chelsea are strong, Arsenal was still around, Gerrard's Liverpool put together one of the greatest non-winning Premier League campaigns. There are so many more competitors in this era, which makes their dominance even more outstanding. United won 3 straight Premier Leagues, 4 in 5 years, as well as 2 Champions League finals with a famous win over Chelsea. They created a dynasty. But City were jealous and they wanted to take it. Alright, so now we're in 2008. United have just won their 3rd Premier League in a row. Ronaldo is the best player in the world and they've just beaten Chelsea to win the Champions League. They are flying and looking pretty much unbeatable. And if you were a football fan back then, if you're a Premier League fan, you knew when Man United came to your stadium, it was a long day. It didn't matter what your team tried. It didn't matter how much effort they put in, how many miles they run, how many tackles Man United were going to win. They made the game insufferable. City were progressing and growing and trying. They were tired of being a middling team and looking to get up the ladder, but you have to understand at this point, they were nowhere near the big boys. The Premier League has generally had a consistent top 4. It's changed in recent years, but the regular top 4 is United, Chelsea, Liverpool and Arsenal. with Tottenham, Aston Villa and Everton lingering around and applying pressure. City were nowhere near those teams, but soon they would gain ground. Staying away from loads of boring legal stuff which is irrelevant to the larger story, I'll leave it like this. Manchester City's previous owner had to give up control of the club because the Premier League doesn't allow convicted criminals to remain in charge of their teams. So City's new owners were announced on the last day of the 2008 summer transfer window, the Abu Dhabi United Group. Sheikh Mansour had taken over the team, and with a strong statement of intent, the spokesman for the team announced that City would finish top 4 within the next 3 seasons and would sign one world-class player soon. And literally on that day, the final day of the transfer window, City signed Brazilian starlet Robinho for a record £32.5 million, a top 10 fee in football history at the time. City were announcing from the beginning that they were here to cause trouble, and if you remember from episode 7 about the Galacticos, Florentino Perez did very similar things, announced early he wanted to sign players and compete straight away. City had just invited themselves to the party in a big way, and other clubs did not like that. Ferguson described them as a small club with a small mentality, stating that they only ever talked about the good half of Manchester. Arsene Wenger was heavily frustrated with the extra finances that City had, especially since Arsenal was saving after the Emirates move. Another competitor in the world's most competitive league wasn't going to be well received, but City didn't care. They rode that wave. And I think this is what I respect the most about them. Takeovers normally in football don't go well, they don't go smoothly. When a club gets a lot of new money for the first time, they try and buy everyone. They spend heavily in all directions. Anyone who's available, I'll pay for him. But it's never really done with a plan, so you get massive holes in the team. Look at PSG. PSG have just had to have a crazy summer this year, signing Gini Wijnaldum, Sergio Ramos, Donnarumma, because for years they had holes in the team. They didn't have fullbacks. Couldn't find a defensive midfielder. Centre back was weak. Manchester City did this takeover perfectly. They had a plan. They knew that to get in the top 6 they needed to cripple the existing one, and that's how they did it. In the 07-08 season, so the year before the takeover, the Premier League table finished like this: Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Everton and Aston Villa. Man City finished at 9th. So as soon as the takeover happened, the plan was to hurt those teams above them so they could take their spot. So to do that, City decided to sign their rivals' players to cripple them and really hurt their performances. Wayne Bridge and Shaun Wright-Phillips came in from Chelsea. Emmanuel Adebayor, Samir Nasri, Gael Clichy and Kolo Touré came from Arsenal. Wow, why not literally sign everyone? Gareth Barry and James Milner from Aston Villa. Julian Lescott from Everton, Owen Hargreaves from Manchester United. I think this exactly is the method to do it. And I kind of like the fact they didn't go for any Man United players really. Owen Hargreaves was over the hill, injury has hurt him a lot, but what is the point of going for United players? Because they're not going to want to leave, and even if they do leave, the rivalry is too big to top, other than the one guy we'll get to later. But City decided to cripple the weaker of the top 6 sides. Arsenal because of their lack of transfer budget, taking 2 of Aston Villa's best 3 players, prizing Everton's key defender from them. If you can get around the weaker teams, you can get stable in the Champions League for a few years, get comfortable, start signing more players, and then make a real assault on the league. Year of the takeover, Manchester City finished 10th. So year before they finished 9th, year of the takeover they finished 10th. In the next 3 seasons, City finished 5th, 3rd and then 1st. In 4 seasons they went from mid-table regulars to strong champions. By embedding more talent, signing more of their rivals' players, City climbed on the back of them to get ahead, and they were on the edge of glory. And so even though we know that they signed from other Premier League teams, those of us who were around watching the team at the time know that there's players I haven't mentioned yet, so just hold on, I'll get to that. I didn't realise at the time because I was so young, but this is like a real nice arc. This is the way to build a team. You've got a poor team that's not doing great. You get a new owner with a lot of money. You've been ridiculed by your biggest rivals for years. Nonsense club, typical old Man City. So you decide to sign well, taking those out around you until you build a team that can now fight one-on-one with your biggest rival for a championship. That's probably why his team is so likeable. The current Manchester City team has a idea that everyone thinks they just buy the league. They got so many players with so much money, so much quality that it's not really fair. But this team wasn't that. They had just started. And because none of the players in the team were major stars up until this point, they were much more likable. I think more people were around them. Right, enough waffling. Let's get into the squad building. So obviously the final team for the 11-12 season might not contain all these players, and I won't mention everyone, but you've got to start with the key contributors. You can't tell the story of the new Manchester City without starting with Carlos Tevez. From my personal memory, Carlos Tevez is the guy that signified that City were taking everything seriously. At the time, he was one of the best strikers in the league, coming off strong performances for Manchester United. He was in his prime, there was no signs of him declining, so trading Old Trafford for Etihad was a big deal. Also, did anyone else know that Tevez wasn't actually signed for Man United? That he was on a 2-year loan from West Ham? I don't know how I didn't know that. Anyway, he was one of the league's best forwards. He's small, powerful, agile, high defensive effort, great finishing. Imagine like a smaller Ollie Watkins supercharged. That's probably the best thing I can think of. Tevez signed in 2009 for £47 million and became the first player to play for both Manchester clubs since 1999. He scored 23 goals in his first season at the club and had about a 1-2 record in the end. A really successful signing which showed great intent. Emmanuel Adebayor also signed in 2009. As an Arsenal fan, this was so annoying because Van Persie never really stayed fit and Eduardo was coming off a broken leg, so to take our best striker, the guy that's there and available every week, was super annoying. Adebayor's a good player, not in the top bracket of strikers, but like the level below. If today's top bracket is Kane and Vardy and Salah, then Adebayor's like an inform Aubameyang. He's just a level below, but when he's on form, he plays like he's in the top bracket. Adebayor had a good time at City. Famously, in one game when Arsenal went to the Etihad, he managed to kick Van Persie in the face, stamp on Fabregas, slap Alex Song, score, and then run across the length of the pitch and celebrate in front of the Arsenal fans in this same game. Serviceable striker for them. Didn't stay too long, but worked out well. Gareth Barry is another player Man City signed from rival Aston Villa. And he's a player I never really understood as a kid. I think it's hard when you're younger to realise how effective defensive midfielders are. I think it's an odd position to understand because they don't do anything flashy. And you have to watch them to get what they're doing. But Gareth Barry is different gravy of a player, but exceptional, great screener, moves the ball forward, just ultra consistent. And he signed in 2009 and had a lot of criticism and a lot of hate because he said he was joining Man City because he wanted to play in the Champions League, which people found crazy because Aston Villa were closer to the Champions League than City were. But Barry saw the vision, he knew where the team was going and he wanted to be there when that happened. He played there for 4 years and was the anchor of the midfield before Fernandinho turned out a strong acquisition. Alright, and now we're into the major pieces of the team. Joe Hart signed for City as a teenager from Shrewsbury and became the starting goalkeeper in the 07-08 season. Stalwart of the club. I think he only signed when he was 19, but put in a lot of miles for the club, put in a lot of effort. Can you imagine Pablo Zabaleta playing as a fullback in today's game? He ran riot on Man City's wing for years, but he was so strong defensively and could get forward, could cross, could create, but wasn't bad at defending 1v1 tricky wingers. Zabaleta would be like the ideal right back for today. If he was slightly faster, a bit more pace, would have been a top level right back. The next to N'Golo Conte and Jamie Vardy, Vincent Kompany is probably the greatest Premier League bargain. Reportedly, it was only £6 million for Man City to sign their future captain, and he actually joined the club as a defensive midfielder but then later converted into a centre-back. Above all else, Kompany was an amazing leader, and I would have loved it if in his latest years he could have stayed healthy more, because he should have lasted longer. His body failed him before his peak did, if you get me. But Kompany, when he was at his prime, if you didn't see him or you didn't watch him, think of like Marquinhos or a more physical Rudiger. He's comfortable with the ball at his feet, strong, dominant in the air. He must have scored 100 headers against Manchester United. Kompany is one of the best defenders in Premier League history, and around this period between 2011 and 2014, he's the foundation of this side. Later on in his City career, Yaya Toure would probably put on the best season from a midfielder English football has ever seen, but at this point, he wasn't that roving madman attacking force yet. But he was a key member in their attacks. He just signed from Barcelona for 24 mil, and it was pretty easy to see why they paid that. He controlled games in this period. Good attacking passing, good ball movement, good dribbling. He was really skilled with the ball at his feet, which is an unfair advantage because he's also 6'4" and built like a shed. Toure was a complete player. You could play as a centre-back or as a 10. He had every skill you need as a player. He's a different breed. Partnered with Gareth Barry and Nigel de Jong, he had a bit more creative license than he did at Barcelona, and he used that effectively. Got lots of assists, got key goals, key braces in the season for Man City. Was one of the stars of the show. Now, the guy I like the most, I think, although some players had higher peaks like Mesut Ozil and Juan Mata and Kevin De Bruyne, David Silva is the best attacking midfielder in Premier League history. If you don't like it, go and argue with someone else. I have never ever seen someone run a game like that at this level. I don't know what it is about him, but everything is so smooth. He's never in a rush. He makes the right pass at the right time every time. That classic Man City goal, the same goal that Pep had Barcelona scoring all the time, the sweat across the box. Think about how many times David Silva is the one playing that pass into the winger, the one where the timing has to be just right, the weight has to be just right. He has to draw in everyone else around him. David Silva is a different level player. Obviously pre-assists and key passes and assists, and the stats are useful and effective. Yeah, they can get slightly corny, but David Silva shows up in those. He's got all the numbers if you're a numbers person, but just on that eye test, he's a special player. And then probably the greatest player in Manchester City history, one of the greatest in Premier League history, Sergio Aguero. I don't really know what else there is to say about Aguero. He's one of those what's understood doesn't need to be said kind of people. Essentially, when he was fit, he was the best striker in the league, and he could score every single type of goal, and he'd score them all the time, and he battered the league. And he was the last piece of this team. They signed him just before this season, the 11-12 season. I think his debut was a home game where he might have scored 2. That's off my mind, that's not off research. I think he scored 2 in his debut, and his City fans were excited because it was, oh, we have a real striker now. And with Roberto Mancini in charge of this team, they were ready for their first title challenge. And the season started off great, exactly the type you want in a season like this. They went undefeated for their first 14 games, I think drawing 2, and they looked like they were flying. This includes the famous 6-1 battering of United at Old Trafford, where David Silva and Yaya Toure shone as Manchester looked like it was making a turn. But a 5-game rough patch put a serious dent in their title plans, and United were back in control of the league. An 8-point gap had opened up between them and their rivals, and the chances of City winning the league looked pretty much written off. But then again, the pendulum swung back. United uncharacteristically slipped up, which means that the lead was only cut to 3 points. The next game on the calendar was the Manchester derby at the Etihad, with the Premier League in the balance. A City win would bring them level on points with United. And from a corner, that man again, Vincent Kompany, bullet header against Man United, gives them the 1-0 win, and then Yaya Toure gets a brace against Newcastle. So we got to the final day of the season. They're level on points, City are ahead on goal difference. United are away to Sunderland and City are home to QPR. In the Sunderland game, Wayne Rooney scored in the first half to secure a 1-0 win, and as it stood, the league looked like it was coming back to Old Trafford. This was because although Pablo Zabaleta gave City the first half lead, 2 second half goals from Djibril Cissé and JB Mackey threw a massive spanner in the works. And it's weird how things happen in football that you don't really understand what's going on. And I would have loved to be there as a QPR fan just to try and work out what. Joey Barton gets sent off after cleaning out Carlos Tevez with an elbow. And then after he gets sent off, he then goes to knee Sergio Aguero and gets in a fight with half of the City team. And I don't really get it. It's one of those where it's so weird at the time. You're looking back and you go, why did he do that? He got a 12-match ban for it. But it didn't make sense. Weirdly enough, it did not make sense. Anyway, City huffed and puffed for the next 40 minutes. QPR had 10 men, and what do you do when you have 10 men? You go into pure park the bus mode. You defend for your lives because QPR still had the chance of getting relegated today. Depending on what happened in other results, they might have gone down, so they were refusing to concede and were trying everything they could to stay up. The tension in the stadium was growing stronger and stronger with each passing minute. And then, game goes to 2-2. Life is breathed back into the Etihad. City are hoping and praying for something to break their way. Another moment that has changed the course of Premier League history. Everything combined in this moment. Everything in this moment is perfect. The tension from the crowd, the look on the Man United players' faces, the tightness of everyone on the pitch, the stress, the anguish, the history, the context, the rivalry. Everything gets right down to this moment.
Rooney goal was enough for the 3 points. Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero! I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again.
And that's it right there. The greatest day in Premier League history. Sergio Aguero secures a title for a team that's never won one before, snatching it from their biggest rivals in the final minute of the season. And off that, they build a dynasty of consistent success from then. Last season reaching a Champions League final, winning 4 titles in the last few years. Manchester City built everything off that platform, that moment. That's the greatest day in Premier League history. This is being recorded on Friday the 9th, so next week's episode will include my thoughts on the Euros and the final, but just quickly, I'm really pulling for England. I didn't think they'd make it this far. If you guys heard my predictions on the last few episodes, I didn't think England would make it this far. I thought pre-tournament that Germany would get them when they matched up, but no, Southgate's huge respect to him, shutting down all the haters. England team have really got everyone behind them. I just hope it all goes right and we get something big to celebrate. But thanks for listening to this episode. I really appreciate all the support on the last 10 episodes. It's kind of tough when you start something new. You want to make sure you got it right, so all the comments and the advice and the help and the support and the sharing is highly appreciated. If you want to keep supporting, please follow the socials, check the Instagram page at the Unsigned Manager, or subscribe to the YouTube channel where I post a podcast as well at the Unsigned Manager. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and I'll see you next week. Thank you and goodbye.